Welcome, everyone. My name is Nkemdilim Uwaje. I'm the CEO of Futuresoft. And today I'm being joined by Ikeme, who is going to introduce himself shortly. And we're going to host a masterclass called How to Build Brands for High Performance and Sustainability. And we're very excited to have everyone here this morning. Let's give a quick overview of what we'll talk about today. So we're going to start with a bit of a conversation where we're going to talk through sustainability, we'll talk to the purpose of a brand, we'll talk through performance and how purpose and performance are related. We'll talk about what role brand actually plays. Then we'll talk about the role of the board and C-suite when it comes to brand strategy and brand strategy development. We'll talk about brand strategy as a whole, where we'll look at stakeholders, internal culture, external stakeholders, partnerships. We'll look at ESG, DEI. We'll look at customer experience. We'll look at product and what role product actually plays in the entire customer experience. We'll look at what role data plays. We'll look at the role of reporting. And then we'll talk about, sort of the key brand challenges that a lot of brands actually face. So I'm just going to get started while Bella joins. So the first sort of thing that, we thought about when we thought about creating this masterclass was, what is sustainability and why should you actually care? And, in answering that, I think sustainability really is a focus on doing business without negatively impacting the environment, community, or society, right? And everyone probably has a sustainability strategy, which is just a framework that helps organizations focus their investments in a way that improve their impact on the community and the environment while engaging with internal and external stakeholders and driving overall performance. So sustainability actually can reduce the cost of operating and can improve your operating profits by 60%, according to a McKinsey study. Also, if you're sustainable, you can increase your productivity through having an inclusive culture by 27% greater profitability and 22% greater productivity. So making sure that sustainability is an integral part of your brand actually makes sense for your business, right? Because it is directly correlated to the performance of your brand. Sustainability as a strategy also entails just having a new perspective, really recognizing that financial gain is not your only imperative, and that social, environmental, and economic gains can actually be enjoyed by everyone, and that the business is, sort of the vehicle through which this can happen. So your business can be used to actually make the world a better place. And I think that's really, sort of what we want to focus on today. So I think Bella is back. So let's see if we can bring her on. 1 second.
Finally.
Yes, here you are. Okay, perfect.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Nkemdilim. My apologies. Our internet can be funny, but here I am. Morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the class. I'll just go right into it because we have so much to cover within 2 hours. So, Nkemdilim, what was the question again? I'm not sure.
So we've already gotten started a little bit.
Okay.
I was just talking about how, your business can actually be used to make the world a better place. And that sustainability as a strategy really starts with answering the question, why are you in business? What's your purpose and why do you exist? So I think, that all of that being said, for me, one of the key questions that we need to answer today is, how do you build a brand for high performance and sustainability?
Oh, wow. So the thing is, you can't build a high-performing organization without high-performing individuals. And then these high-performing individuals are working within a high-performing culture. So you must have a culture that is collaborative, inclusive, and attracts and engages future-minded leaders. it's always best to have people who align firmly with your purpose and your values, even as they come in, as opposed to trying to swing them to your side after they come. So in the daily operations of your business, how do you imbibe your values on a daily basis across operations with everything that you do? Do all your stakeholders know exactly what you're about? Do they know what is a no-no for you and what is an absolute yes for you? Do they know the purpose of the organization? And are they reminded? Because like my friend in PR told me recently, she says, why there's so much repetition in PR is because it builds brand resonance. And that's the truth. Think about it. All our favorite brands, they keep telling you what they're about and what they do day in, day out, that even without them saying anything, you can actually speak on their behalf. And then another thing, to be a high performing organization and be able to tie sustainability and all the really good stuff, is to understand what your unique business drivers are. So a lot of the time, I find that brands sometimes get so carried away with the day-to-day that they don't focus on their unique business drivers. And the thing is, these drivers, they can change. So it's everything from having a sustainable supply chain to the number of locations, the volume of sales, the work culture, employee, how you engage your employees and how they feel about working for you, community impact, ESG compliance. There's just so much, that goes into knowing your unique business drivers. But what I'll say is no two companies have the same business drivers, which is why I'm calling them unique. You need to have an appreciation and understanding of your unique business drivers. So as you build a strategy and bring in sustainability as part of your DNA, it's effective and it can get easily implemented. And then of course, prioritizing stakeholder engagement. You absolutely must. Your internal stakeholders, your external stakeholders. So I know a lot is said about the customer experience, but there is something very real about a great employee experience, because you talk about this all the time. It's an employee's market. So what are you doing to keep your employees engaged and give them a fantastic experience? And then to round it all off, what I'll say is whatever you decide to do and whatever path you choose to take, however you decide to start or continue, it's important that you communicate your values and your purpose. If you're not communicating, people have to, it's almost like they say winking in the dark. There you are doing amazing things, but because you're not communicating, people don't know what you're doing. And then build your purpose around your customers' needs or your stakeholders' needs. When you do things like that, you really can't go wrong. So Nkem, what do you think? So who should be involved? I've mentioned stakeholders. So who exactly do you think should be involved? I think let's bring it home a bit.
Yeah, so the simple answer is everyone, right? I'll break that down a little bit, but I think for a while now, the days of marketing and design sort of being in the hands of the marketing department or corporate comms department is really, sort of like out of the window. When it comes to sort of the brand, it's really the responsibility of the board. And, a lot of the time, the board actually has no oversight of brand and doesn't get any reports when it comes to branding, to marketing, to brand strategy. But I think this is really where, things need to change and have already started changing, right? I think in order to design and implement a brand strategy that really differentiates you and is able to sort of really overcome present challenges to build brand equity and brand sustenance, you have to have responsible leadership, and you have to have the board involved from the top, right? So boards and their subcommittees have to also be aware of the various facets and risks that brand strategy or the lack thereof actually brings with it. So you talked about customer experience. Poor customer experience can actually impact how much of customer entrenchment you have and how much customer retention you have. You also talked about employee experience, right? So poor employee experience immediately is linked directly to how you can attract talent and how much talent you can actually retain, right? And that, again, is aligned and linked to your bottom line. Then you have reputational risk, right? I'm sure everyone has heard the terms greenwashing, blue washing. Transparency is becoming more and more important when it comes to stakeholder engagement and the way that you communicate to your stakeholders. diversity, equity, and inclusion are important. All of these things are things that are, sort of board level discussions. So you really have to think about how all of these things impact your brand perception, what the importance of employee resource groups are, how digital transformation, sort of plays a role in all of this in terms of customer experience, operations, and skills management and acquisition. So your C-level executives definitely have to be infused in the brand strategy from a day-to-day operations perspective, but your board is, sort of the strategic driver of that brand strategy. So who are the C-level executives? A chief brand officer. So this is a relatively new executive level position that a lot of corporations, companies, organizations, and agencies have sort of put in place recently. And it typically reports to the CEO or the board of directors directly and is responsible for the brand's image, experience, and promise, right? So it sort of cuts across the visual brand identity, the actual customer and employee experience, as well as stakeholder experience, and keeping the brand promise, right? Then obviously your COO has a really big role to play because all of these things are, sort of interconnected and create the day-to-day sort of operating environment. Then you have your chief sustainability officer that plays a really big role in making sure that you're hitting your ESG metrics. I talked about ESG, I talked about DEI. Excuse me, all of these things fall under sustainability. You've got your chief marketing officer who is in charge of creating the narrative, making sure that your messaging is aligned with the brand strategy, making sure that visually the brand is consistent, making sure that everything is in place, right? You've got your chief people and culture officer or chief HR officer that is in charge of attracting the right talent. All of that happens through the brand. Then you've got obviously your product and customer experience people. You've got your chief data officer that is in charge of data, not just consumer data and transaction data, but really data across all of the different channels. And then obviously you've got technology, digital IT, that is in charge of the actual digital transformation that manifests through products, through the actual infrastructure behind your brand. And then you've got your employee resource groups, which are basically voluntary groups that are employee-led and focus on diversity and inclusion. So this could be, women at Cisco, for example. It could be, sort of like any kind of minority group that creates diversity within your organization. And so, as I said in the beginning, everyone really is involved in brand strategy in one way or the other. But Bella, I think, we've talked a lot about sort of like why you should do it and how to do it, but what exactly is brand strategy? I think a lot of people, don't really have enough insight into that. So it would be great if you can just, sort of tell us what the elements of brand strategy actually are.
Okay, so like all things, brand strategy as a concept has evolved with time. I mean, a few years ago, barely a decade ago, it was only about your visual identity, your messaging, your voice, and all of that. But now it's so much more because as we become more aware and as we become more mindful of how engaged we should be across people, the planet, just generally imbibing everything that goes into creating a sustainable business, you need to first of all look at the first element to consider are your brand values, which goes back to what is your why, what is your purpose. You need to, because why the brand values are so important is because once you align them very nicely with the people who get you, I'm going to use the term get, then you're already on a smooth path, because you are immediately aligned with people who have the same values as you do. And like I said earlier, these values have to be communicated, and then the customer and all your stakeholders have to experience these values. There's no point telling me your integrity is one of your values, but I mean, you send an email about a sale, for instance, this is an example. You send me an email about a sale, but for some reason, if I miss that email and I come to shop a week before, you don't say to me as in, oh, Bella, if you held on for one more week, you would be part of the sale and get a big discount. So sometimes it's even in the little things that translates your brand values. And then there's your brand voice and your tone. What is your personality? Are you the best friend? Are you the snarky sister? You know, and for me, I like to personalize brand voice and tone, because even within marketing teams and within organizations, that's how you come up with a brand voice that is authentic. You need to look at it as we are speaking to humans, you know, so your brand voice has to be very clear. And with your brand voice, people have to understand, okay, this brand stands for, I'm going to use again, integrity. So if something in your industry happens, you should speak about it if it's something that concerns integrity. People would be expecting you to speak about it or speak to it and not be silent simply because it's convenient to do so. And then, of course, like you mentioned, the visual brand identity, which unfortunately is where most organizations kind of like focus when it comes to branding. Once they have their logo, check, their colors, check, like, okay, great, we have an amazing brand, but it's so much more than that. It's visual identity across everything, everywhere you show up. So it's down to even how your staff show up and maintaining the same color, Pantone, and just color gradients. Little things like that are the things that create brand resonance. Think about it. Coca-Cola has never changed their red. Across every single thing that they present you with, the red stays the same, the font stays the same. They might nuance it when they go into different locations, but it stays the same. And then, of course, the perception. You need to work hard at building the right brand perception. Then there's the brand story, which is your foundation. This is when you begin to communicate your why. We advise, and Nkemdilim and I, we talk about this all the time, we advise every brand to have a brand story. Invest in your brand story, not only for external stakeholders, but importantly for your internal stakeholders. Let them know why you exist. Let them know why they are doing life with you. And then you spoke already about the culture, and then there's the ESG elements. Which of the pillars are we going to be focusing on? How are we going to be reporting it? You spoke about transparency as well. There's diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we show up? We can't say that we are big on DEI, but there is no diversity reflecting in any of our communication or anywhere we show up. And then, of course, you spoke about the customer experience and the product. Technology is a big part of it. How do you personalize? How do you translate technology? You know, it's easy to get on any technology bandwagon and say, oh, this works for A, so this will work for me. But how have you personalized it to suit your brand and what you stand for, which goes back to the brand ethos. So I must warn us, we're going to be hearing a lot about brand ethos, brand strength, and brand equity in this conversation. So Nkem, what are the challenges you've observed? Because I mean, going into all of this, there are so many challenges that a brand could face.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge is organizations not having a brand at all, or having a very weak brand, or focusing on visual only, right? So there are a lot of people who think your logo is your brand, but obviously from, you know, sort of the brand elements that you've listed out, it's really clear that your brand is way, way, way beyond your logo. We've also seen a lot of brands with incomplete brand positioning, where they've sort of focused on one part of them, but not on the entire brand. So you then sort of don't know all the services that they offer. You also don't know what they really stand for. You're not really clear on their values because they've just sort of shown you one part of them. Also, one of the things that, you know, I think, especially when it comes to big corporates, is a really big issue is the lack of collaboration and teamwork within the various units, right? So as I said, everyone has to be involved in the brand strategy, you know, sort of from the development side, it's more the board and C-level, but then from the execution and implementation side, it's really across board. And that can only be achieved if we're all pulling at the same end of the rope, right? It can only be achieved if our KPIs within the organization are aligned properly. It can only be achieved if we're really, really thinking of this effort as all of us are responsible for it and all of us need to deliver this together, right? That means that you need to share data. It means that you need to share resources. It means you need to share plans. It means that you need to work together. Then obviously ESG and DEI are often sort of seen as these check boxes and treated as separate parts, right? So they're not really infused in the brand, and it's just like, in your sustainability report, you would say, oh yes, we've we've reduced our carbon footprint, we've planted 5 trees, and we've hired 10 more women, and we've now got 1 woman on the board, right? That's great, but are you really living the values, right? Is reduction of carbon emissions really part of your brand? Is it important to you? What are you doing to make sure that that is consistently done? How are you integrating that into your brand, right? And that a lot of the time really comes from a lack of understanding. And I think the understanding really is, first of all, the importance of these things being integrated into the brand, and then how to do it, right? How do you seamlessly integrate? Then I think another really big brand challenge is poor customer experience. And that often comes from not having enough data, not doing any kind of focus groups, not engaging the customer in your product development, in, sort of not looking at your support tickets and queries to really see, what are they saying? Does this make sense, right? And stuff like that. Reputational damage. Here we go to greenwashing, blue washing. It can be how you treat your workers. It can be how you treat the environment. It can be how you treat your employees, right? And we've seen many brands sort of fall victim of this, both globally and locally. And I think the more awareness there is to these different parts of a brand, the more, this will become a challenge and a really big trap that a lot of brands can fall into. We've also seen brands that sort of focus on the wrong marketing metrics and business drivers. So you talked about, sort of business drivers being unique. So just because one business driver is, a certain thing for one company doesn't mean that it is the same thing for you. So really understanding what are my unique business drivers and how do I, sort of track them? What are the metrics that I should be looking at, right? So when it comes to social media, for example, a lot of brands are tracking followers, but followers is really not an indication of how well your brand is doing, right? Just an indication of how much money you've spent to attract followers. How engaged they are, on the other hand, really is an indication of how entrenched they are in your brand. High attrition rates. And we see this, I think, at the moment, it's high for everyone. But in order to now sort of, attract the right type of talent, you really have to look at, is my brand positioned properly? And we see a lot of brands that are not sufficiently positioned to really attract and retain the right type of talent. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to sort of segue into the actual masterclass. And just to give sort of like a little bit of a recap, this masterclass, sort of focuses on, or will take a deeper look at brand strategy as a driver for high performance and sustainability, stakeholder management, and where we'll explore sort of the interconnected relationships and the impact on your communications and marketing touch points, how you amplify your ESG efforts without being accused of greenwashing or blue washing, inclusive marketing and communications. So how do you make DEI a part of your brand? How do you also leverage your customer experience? How do you make sure that you're reducing friction in your product design and customer experience, addressing buying objections, driving conversion across the different stages of your marketing funnel? We'll talk a little bit about marketing automation, data personalization, and also the role of reporting. And then we'll go back to the brand challenges, right? And look at those a little bit closer. And I'm sure that many of you will be able to sort of identify, with some of the challenges that we'll talk about. As we go along, please, if you have any questions, just put them into the chat so that we can answer them as we go along. And we'll have some time for Q&A later in the day. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and then we can get started. All right, so like I mentioned, we will be talking about how to build brands for high performance and sustainability. And again, brand strategy, stakeholder management, ESG, inclusive marketing, optimizing CX and product design, data personalization, automation and reporting, top brand challenges, and then we'll talk a little bit about what next. So let's talk brand strategy. And we're going to talk about the how, why, and what, and sort of look at brand strategy as a driver for high performance and sustainability. Now, at Futuresoft, we've developed a framework that, sort of looks at, on one hand, enhancing the brand equity through strategy, processes, governance, customer experience, and people, and also delivering change through change management and sustainability. And we've got sort of 3 different phases. And the first phase is broken down into 2 elements. So first, it's sort of auditing where you are, right? This is where we identify your brand challenges, we audit your digital channels, we look at your brand identity, we look at your strategy, we look at people, we look at processes, we look at the governance structures that you've got around brand. And we also do strategy workshops where we actually look at your business goals and we sort of, dive a little bit deeper. Then there's the strategy phase where we build the foundation, right? So this is where we develop strategies and processes, we develop your governance framework if you don't have one, or we optimize it. And then we also do brand sprints and prototyping for specific brand challenges. And I'll talk about each of these things in much more detail as we go along. The next part is the second phase, which focuses on optimization and implementation. So when it comes to optimization, we really focus on optimizing the brand and, sort of also developing new strategies and looking at the brand identity, the marketing channels, and the customer touch points, and just making sure that all of them are optimized to actually deliver the strategy that we've created in the first phase. And then it comes to the actual implementation of the strategies. And the implementation really focuses on, sort of the actual day-to-day. How do you go into, sort of real-time, operations? Then you have monitoring and evaluation, where we talk about, sort of like how you track, how do you turn your data into insights, how do you make sure that you're actually able to, sort of really deliver a lot of value. And then we tweak the strategy, and then you go back to auditing again, reviewing your strategy again, optimizing again, and implementing again. So brand strategy is not something that is sort of a one-off, very much in line with, sort of all the activities that you do within an organization that are strategy related. It's sort of like an iterative cycle that you, sort of go through bit by bit. So let's talk about the audit, right? So in the audit, we, take a deep dive into what are the organizational goals, right? So you can't do brand strategy without understanding where the organization is going. You can't do brand strategy without really understanding, what are the weaknesses, strengths, opportunities, and what are the threats for a brand. You can't do it without understanding critical success factors, key challenges, the picture of success. We also look at your positioning and value proposition. So Bella already talked a little bit about purpose, mission, vision, and values. This is what really gives your brand personality. It is where you position. It is what attracts your customers. It is what attracts your employees. It is what attracts shareholders and investors. It is where you find, the biggest level of alignment. Then there's your UVP, which is your unique value proposition. So we look at what makes you special, what makes you unique, and what do you deliver that no one else delivers. Bella talked about your brand ethos and your brand philosophy. So these are all parts of your brand that are extremely important. And if you don't have them, this is where we would then sort of find out that these things don't exist or they're not optimal. And then really sort of think about how do you change that. We also look at sustainability within your positioning and value proposition. We go into your stakeholder management. first of all, doing stakeholder mapping, identifying all the stakeholders, what communication channels do you communicate with them on currently, and which channels should you be communicating with them on? What actually matters to them, what's important to them, what information do they want to have, and where does that information come from? We look at partners, ecosystem collaborators, and we look at your competitors as well. Now, part of the audit is also to audit the brand, right? So this is brand perception, brand reputation, your brand voice, the personality of the brand. Bella talked about the messaging pillars, which are basically communication pillars that support your brand. Bella talked about the brand story as well, brand design, visual brand identity. We look at the customer experience across all the different customer touch points. We look at communication and support channels. We look at the customer journey through lead generation, onboarding, servicing, retention, remarketing, and creating ambassadors. We look at your marketing and communications channels, basically looking at your marketing funnel, sort of going through what are you doing at the top of the funnel, in the middle of the funnel, and at the bottom of the funnel? What are your customer touch points? What products do you use to communicate and to engage and to sell? What channels do you use to do those things? What content are you creating and putting out there, and how are you distributing that content? We look at your existing strategies around marketing and comms, the tactics, as well as how well have these strategies and tactics actually performed. We also look at what are the metrics that you're actually looking at for success. And then we look at your budget and the ROI that you're getting with that budget, how that budget is being deployed, whether you're spending in the right places, are you spending enough, and things like that. Now, once the audit is done, we sort of go into the actual foundation building, right? So this is where we create strategies and plans. We develop personas, lookalike audiences, stakeholder maps, database segmentations and guidelines. We create content marketing strategies and plans. We ensure that you have email marketing and lead generation frameworks. We look at your event and event marketing strategies and create those if they don't exist, or optimize them. We also create executive profiling strategies and design integrated marketing and communications campaigns. Then we also, at the foundation building stage, sort of look at the customer experience stages and the processes that you have in place. And as you can see on the image on the left, right, this is, for example, sort of a map of the funnel, right, where we've mapped top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, and all the different interconnected relationships, as well as all the different touch points, what happens at each touch point, how information flows. And that's really what we look at, right? We look at your funnel, the touch points, the channels. Where does lead generation happen? Where is, conversion happening? What is the ability for conversion within your funnel and within the stages of your funnel? What content requirements does your funnel have? Where is there friction, right? Where are the drop-off points? So analytics play a really big role here to make sure that we actually understand the right things. What are your bounce rates? Where are the remarketing opportunities? What are the purchase patterns? How is user experience, user behavior actually happening within your funnel? We look at what your drivers for entrenchment are. We look at loyalty and referrals. We look at reviewing your existing advertising audiences and optimizing those as well. Then we, depending on sort of where you are and what stage you are, if you've got key brand challenges, brand sprints and prototyping are used to address that. So this is where we use design thinking, and we, sort of create concepts and develop and test prototypes. So this is a really great way of very, very quickly getting to a point where is this going to work or not, without spending a lot of money, right? So a lot of the time what we see is that organizations sort of develop products without really prototyping them, without testing them on actual customers. And then they're like, oh, this product didn't work, it failed. No one was interested in it. We only had 100 people who actually signed up for this, right? That's when you know that you've sort of lost it, right? And that's why brand sprints and prototyping are so important, because you can very quickly get feedback from actual users and then sort of take that back into your development and build the actual product. We also look at sort of optimizing your governance structures. So this is looking at reporting lines and the type of committees that you have, especially in very large organizations, looking at what is the frequency of meetings, who are the attendees, who has ownership of all of these different things, what are the metrics that you're using for reporting, what is the frequency of your reporting, who does the reporting actually go to, what collaboration and data input is required for really properly done reports. We look at your SOPs across building your visual brand identity, your customer journeys, your brand marketing, content sourcing, creation, distribution, customer service, and also how you do your analytics, because a lot of the time, the reason why the output is bad is because the process is bad. So you really need to make sure that you have standard operating processes across all of these different marketing activities. And then we create a change management plan, because without that, you're not actually able to move forward, especially in a large organization. In a small organization, it might be easy to get everyone on the same page, but in a large organization, you do need a proper plan in place, and you need to carry stakeholders along. You also need editorial guidelines, because a lot of the time you have multiple parties who are editing content across different digital channels, whether this is your website, whether this is your mobile app, whether this is your blog. And you want to make sure that there are guidelines that ensure that the quality of what comes out is always the same. You also sort of want to look at your learning and development planning. And this is why I said everyone is involved, right? So this is people and culture, where people and culture really needs to look at how do we develop our internal marketing skills? How do we develop brand building skills? How do we develop communication skills? What kind of people do we actually need? Do we need to grow the team? Do we need to optimize the team? What exactly do we need to do? We also look at the visual. So this is the next stage, right? So this is where we actually get into the actual optimization. So we finished with the foundation building. We've done everything that needs to do at foundation level. And now we go into optimizing and developing your brand identity, marketing channels, and customer touchpoint. So depending on whether this is, sort of a rebrand, or whether this is just a brand refresh, or just a review of the brand identity, we look at, sort of the visual brand identity refresh. We look at the logo, brand manual, brand collateral, and work on all of that. We then also go on to develop or refresh your brand assets as may be needed, right? So every, sort of part of this really depends on where you are as an organization. So it's not everything that is sort of being done for each client that we, sort of have, but we generally would look at how do we make sure that you have all the brand assets required for digital and print, multimedia, web, and mobile. And then we also go into sort of how do we deepen the brand? How do we optimize and develop brand marketing, stakeholder education, and stakeholder engagement opportunities? How do we deepen thought leadership development? How do we identify and develop ecosystem and community building opportunities, right? So this could be a conference, this could be, sort of an op-ed piece in a newspaper. It could be many things that you can use to deepen your brand. How do we identify and develop opportunities to create and amplify socioeconomic development and the impact of the brand? How do we identify avenues for seamless integration of impact and sustainability efforts into the fabric of the brand? So this is where we look at how do we actually incorporate everything that you're doing on the sustainability side into the fabric of the brand so that it's seamless and it doesn't look like it's layered on top, and it doesn't look like it's just a checkbox that you're checking. We also look at what new marketing channels do you actually need to enhance your marketing. And then we update and optimize your customer experience, right? So we usually do a customer journey map that goes across lead generation, onboarding, servicing, retention, remarketing, and referrals. And we then, sort of look at what are the parts of this that need to be optimized, where is there friction, and all of that would have happened in the audit stage and would have been addressed through the strategy stage. So this is the actual implementation where we do the actual optimization before we then go into the main optimization, main implementation of the strategy. So actions speak louder than words, and this is where implementation becomes so key. So in the main implementation of your brand strategy, this is where you run campaigns, you focus on lead generation, focus on launching new products, you focus on building brand awareness, amplifying your messaging pillars, deepening your customer loyalty and entrenchment, increasing your sales, showcasing impact. You build out your prototypes into fully functional products, websites, portals, or content. You do digital marketing that attracts and engages stakeholders across your digital channels. So this is social, web, blogs, multimedia, running ads. You focus on events and event marketing. So this could be in-person or virtual events that are focused on thought leaderships, sales conversion, lead generation, brand awareness, consumer education, etc. You look at your PR and comms. Ideally, this should be always on so that you amplify activities and sustain top of the mind awareness. You would work on your internal communications, right? So you leverage your digital channels to build and reinforce your culture and make sure that, you know, your employees are talking about you in a positive way. I think this year, especially, we've seen a lot of employees talking about toxic workplaces, and you don't want to be one of those brands that is being called out, which means that you need to do the right thing and you need to communicate the right thing and you need to enforce and amplify your culture at every opportunity that you get. So you need to think about employee touch points, not just customer touch points. Then obviously there's outdoor and experiential, where you create experiences and visibility, executive profiling that basically involves your leadership in speaking engagements, contributory articles, op-eds, facilitation and teaching opportunities, as well as stakeholder education. Part of this brand strategy implementation is also business development, especially for B2B brands. Or if you're an NGO and you're focused on getting new funders, or if you rely on partnerships. So this is where you sort of look at how do you implement your referral system, how do you use conferences and events to create new opportunities for your business, how do you use direct marketing, how can you use LinkedIn inbox campaigns, drip campaigns for email marketing, and how do you personalize your newsletters, mailers, event invitations, and, you know, sort of use that to really drive your business development. Then there's obviously also strategic partnership development, where you look at, you know, sort of how do you position as a preferred partner so that you generate leads that come to you and not just you going out there to look for partners. And the last part of the framework is to analyze, track, and tweak. So this is where data, insights, and metrics play a big role. So you turn your data into insights. Ideally, you want to have a visual dashboard with your key performance indicators that is real time, that management can look at. You want to be clear on what is the baseline that we had before we started this brand strategy and brand optimization process, so that you can track against that, right? And what are the goals as well? What are the campaign insights you're getting? What are the customers saying? What are the customer insights? What are your sales drivers? What are your loyalty drivers? What is your customer acquisition cost, your customer lifetime value? What is the ROI that you're getting for your marketing? And in order to, you know, sort of do this, some of the common metrics to track are brand awareness, reach, and visibility. So here you would track top of the mind awareness, distinctiveness, geographic reach, number of cold job applications that you get. You would track conversion, signups, and sales. And for that, you sort of track your conversion rate from digital channels. You track the number of signup sales and referrals that you get. You track inquiries from potential customers, partners, funders, etc. You look at your website traffic, how many visits, what's your bounce rate, how much time are people spending on your site, what's your click-through rate, what's your SEO score, what leads have you generated, what are the downloads that you're getting, what is the sales volume for e-commerce, for example. You would look at your social media reach, recognitions, and media mentions. So how much reach do you have? What are the impressions? How many followers? What is the engagement level? You look at your email marketing growth and effectiveness. So is your mailing list growing? What's your click-through rate? What's the open rate for your emails? How does that compare to industry norms, right? Are you above? Are you below? What content is resonating, so that it can help you then tweak your email marketing strategy. You would look at your PR and comms, your print and traditional media mentions. You look at your paid, earned, and owned media. You would look at partnerships. How many new partners do you have? How many partners have renewed their partnerships? How many partnership inquiries did you get, right? And how many sort of partnership conversations are you having in your pipeline? Then you would also look at revenue. So what is the impact and revenue growth of this brand strategy. Sometimes that's a little bit hard to track, especially in B2B where you have much longer, conversion cycles, but it's definitely something to keep at the top of your metrics that you're tracking, especially at the board level, so that you know that you're deploying finances the right way. So what should you remember from all of this that I've said? Your brand strategy must be aligned with the business goals of an organization to ensure prioritization, right? So if you're not aligning with the organizational goals, chances are you're not going to be very successful. Your brand strategy has to cut across visual branding, brand positioning, product, customer experience, and also function as a strategic driver. It has to be driven by purpose, value, mission, vision, and alignment with your chosen sustainability pillars. You have to have board level oversight from a strategy and risk perspective. If you don't have that, then you're barely scraping the surface, because then it's not going to be an effective brand strategy. You also have to have a proper governance framework in place to ensure effectiveness. You have to really look at your brand strategy as a strategic investment as opposed to a cost center. A lot of the time, marketing budgets are the first that get slashed or that get reappropriated. They're the first to sort of get put by the side. Oh yeah, it's just for making noise. But the truth is it's for building your brand, and you need to be really strategic about it, and you need to change your mindset about how you're looking at that. And it is a strategic investment in this day and age, because brand equity actually, goes into your valuation, goes into sort of looking at your bottom line. It helps you attract the right investors, employees, and everything. You also need to focus on data-driven decision-making. So how do you track the right metrics for performance? How do you visualize them? How do you make sure that, the right people are seeing those metrics, and that you've got, sort of like people who will scream and say, hey, this metric is not moving. What's going on? What do we need to change in our strategy in order to make that happen? And a brand strategy must be developed through continuous training and capacity development across board. So those are sort of the key things that your, sort of brand strategy, really needs to do in order to be successful. So under stakeholder management, we're going to sort of look at how you influence stakeholder alignment and engagement, and how interconnected relationships impact your communication and marketing touchpoints. And this, sort of really focuses on the importance of, sort of stakeholders within the organization, and the role that those stakeholders actually play. So what is a stakeholder? So a stakeholder is a party that has an interest in an organization and can either affect or be affected by the business. So you've got primary stakeholders. These are your employees. This is your leadership, investors, customers, vendors, suppliers. As you begin to actively incorporate sustainability, stakeholders can basically include your communities, governments, regulatory agencies, especially for those in regulated industries. That's a really big, sort of stakeholder that you need to manage and engage with. Trade associations, as well as the general public. Now, internal stakeholders, their interest is in the, sort of internal entity, and is usually through a direct relationship, such as employment, ownership, or investment, right? So these are your shareholders, employees, people who are invested into your brand in some way. Then you've got the external ones. So their interest is not through directly working with the organization, but they're affected in some ways by the actions and outcomes of the business, right? So this can be, community, it can be the general public, regulators, and things like that. So alignment should be driven through your actual values. And this is really, really important. And your stakeholder alignment should be values driven. So this means that, you should really align your values with the stakeholders that you engage with. If not, you can sort of have sort of immediate conflict, right? So it's really, really important to make sure that you are very clear on, sort of the stakeholder engagement, the people that you're engaging with, whether your interests are aligned, the values aligned. So most of the efficient companies that successfully manage the interests and expectations of all their stakeholders are companies that have alignment in terms of values. Organizations that want to be serious about sustainability have to ensure that it really attracts and is not only attracted to potential stakeholders with alignment interests. So it's really important that you really use your values to sort of drive the engagement that you have with the different stakeholder groups. Stakeholder engagement is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So stakeholder engagement is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing conversation between your organization and its stakeholders. And we've seen organizations do really interesting things around this. So if we look at Dell, for example, Dell at some point made all of the recordings of their board meetings public. They made all of the minutes of meetings and everything public and put it out there. And they had a stakeholder engagement forum where they engaged shareholders, they engaged employees, they engaged vendors. And this was all in a public space. And this was the first time that this was done. And a lot of organizations were like, oh my God, you're publicly listed. At that point, they were still publicly listed. You're a publicly listed company. How can you do this? There's too much transparency. But the truth is that because they did that, they were able to sort of see friction with the different stakeholder groups. They were able to see questions that were not answered. They were able to optimize the content that they had out there. That they could refer to, whether this was in, sort of having FAQs out there or having blog posts out there, having articles out there. They were able to use the learnings and the data that they got and the insights they got from this portal to actually drive their stakeholder engagement. So it's ongoing, it's never ending pretty much. So common elements that you have to include in all stakeholder engagement initiatives include defining the purpose and objectives of the stakeholder engagement process, identifying the stakeholder groups that will be involved, determining the methods of engagement that will be used, developing a communications plan. So this is really important. How do you communicate? When do you communicate? What's the frequency? What's the tone? Who is doing it? Who takes ownership for it? Conducting the stakeholder engagement activities. So what are these different activities? So this could be, your AGM, it could be events, it can be conferences, it could be, online and digital engagements that you have, evaluating the results of the stakeholder engagement process. So this is really important, always making sure that you're monitoring and evaluating the outcome of your process. So stakeholder mapping is basically a map of the interconnected relationships that exist between the different stakeholders, from strategic intent to the actual implementation of the results of the engagement. So what does this mean? It basically means that you have to look at what role, do each of these stakeholders play? How do they engage? Are they interconnected? How does information flow? How does knowledge flow from one stakeholder group to another and to the organization? How do the different touch points that you have within your brand actually come into play? What is the, sort of the money flow as well within the organization? Also, what is the interconnectedness between all of them? So stakeholder mapping is important and helps you visualize your stakeholders, who they are, the interests, how they might be affected by your organization's projects or products, or the actions that you take as an organization. So if your new product maybe impacts the community around you directly in a negative or positive way, it's important to understand how that dynamic can actually, sort of influence your business. And when you think about, sort of maybe the NSAS protests where you had, a lot of shopping malls get looted, right? And some of them didn't. And the reason why they didn't is because they had very different sort of stakeholder engagement strategies to the local communities that then guarded those presence. And obviously there was money involved, but there was also stakeholder engagement involved. And this is, sort of part of the strategy. How do you make sure that the values are aligned, that interests are aligned? And how do you also identify and categorize the various stakeholders by, sort of creating this visual representation that helps you see what the different stakeholders groups are, the interests, the powers they possess as well, whether they represent inhibiting or supporting factors for the organization to realize its objectives, the methods in which they should be dealt with. So it's really important that you have this type of stakeholder map, done within your organization. Communication and transparency is also important. So stakeholder engagement process, like I said, is continuous and it's interactive and, sort of really essential to your organization. And the best way to communicate with your stakeholders is to send out updates regularly to ensure that they catch up with all the updates and the latest developments, and that they really understand what's going on. So you need to be clear and concise in your communication. You need to be transparent. When you're communicating with stakeholders, you have to be honest. I think that's the most important thing, right? Don't tell lies, don't sugarcoat things. Just be honest about this is where we are, but we're working on it, especially if it's something that's negative. Share both the good and the bad news, right? It's better they hear it from you than they hear it from somewhere else, and then it becomes this big scandal that is dragged in the media and your reputation is in the mud. Follow through with your commitments so that you can build trust and credibility within your stakeholder audience. Be responsive to the stakeholder inquiries, right? So when you get inquiries from your stakeholders, don't just say, oh, that's a difficult question. I don't want to answer that, so I'm going to ignore it, because that question is going to come back, and it's going to come back with a vengeance, right? Because in this digital age, it's not just one person having the question or seeing the question or being able to retweet or share the question. It's many, many people. And that in itself can create a lot of reputational damage. You have to be clear on the different communication channels and sort of use those channels adequately. And that's why the stakeholder mapping is so important. You also have to keep your stakeholders informed across all of the activities. Now, what are the benefits of proper stakeholder engagement? Stakeholder engagement is an integral part of success of any business. So this is because without buy-in from your key stakeholders, it's really difficult to implement change or reach your goals. So the benefits that you get from stakeholder engagement include, but they're not limited to, better decision-making. When you're involving your stakeholders in your decision-making process, you get a lot of valuable input and feedback, and you avoid making decisions that could alienate or anger your stakeholders. You can also use stakeholder engagement to foster relationships. So the stronger your relationships with your stakeholders are, the more benefit you actually get, so from that, and you're able to, sort of use that to attract more customers, to get access to capital. So there are many benefits of fostering these relationships. Positive reputation for your business. When stakeholder input is valued, they're most likely to speak positively about your business. And this will help you attract new customers, new partners, new investors, and it can even lead to increased sales. Positive employee experience. So employees are a really big stakeholder group, and it's important that they have a good and positive work environment where your employees feel valued and respected. And this would lead to increased creativity, productivity, and a reduction in turnover, and obviously impact the performance of your organization. So what do you have to remember about stakeholder management? So stakeholder management, I think, firstly, you need to remember that you ensure to attract and choose stakeholders that share similar values and align to your brand and purpose, that you prioritize as your stakeholders are assets and can affect your business or be affected by it. So reduce your risk by engaging them. Involve deftly managing the interests and expectations of your stakeholders, and making sure that you have ongoing conversations, right? Don't engage at sort of in a one-off manner. Involve your stakeholder in sort of your business decisions in the decision-making process. Make sure that you have your stakeholder map clearly defined and set up. Take time to study the dynamics that you have in your stakeholder engagement plan. Involve stakeholder mapping to visually highlight the interconnected relationships between the stakeholders. Identify and categorize what matters to them, the amount of power they possess, possible risk, and the best methods of engagement. Use appropriate and effective channels of communication. Be prioritized in order to achieve wide stakeholder buy-in, to implement change and achieve goals. So we'll talk about strategic approach to ESG. How do you amplify your ESG efforts without being accused of greenwashing and bluewashing? And I'll explain what those terms mean in a minute. So first of all, what is ESG? ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's a set of standards that basically measure your business's impact on society, the environment, and how transparent you are and accountable you are in terms of your governance. It has potential to grow your business while benefiting the environment and the community, as 2/3 of investors today consider ESG factors when investing in a business. So I think it's really an important topic, and it's no longer just a buzzword. And I think everyone who sits on a board, or works in a large corporate has definitely heard about the organization's ESG indicators. So an ESG strategy could demonstrate that a company is reducing risks, such as adapting manufacturing processes to meet future environmental legislations, which could make the business a good bet for longer term growth, right? So how are you adopting your manufacturing? Are your buildings green? How are you generating power for your organization? How environmentally friendly are your products? Are you able to recycle those products? Are you using recycled materials as input? ESG is basically a very essential component today for business growth, and there's really a lot of value in understanding this properly. And businesses can adopt principles and approaches in terms of how ESG can benefit their organization. Now, this is a good sort of graphic that sort of looks at ESG. Who does it matter to? So it matters to investors, it matters to ESG rating agencies, it matters to NGOs, government regulators. And what do they want? They want data analytics, they want management of your risk, they want leadership, alignment and good governance, they want policies and codes of conduct, they want external assurance and recognition. And then on the other side, there's the corporate responsibility, which matters to your current and potential employees, your customers, your media, the general public. And they want positive societal impact. They want high-level summaries. They want feel-good stories. So you've got like that one side that is super corporate, super metric focused. And then you've got the other side that really is more focused on, sort of the brand, right? So you have to demonstrate performance while building reputation. And sort of the middle part of that is where you've got your integrated, sort of reporting. So all of these things are really important. And when you're thinking about your brand, you are thinking more on the right side, right? But you need the input from the left side, from the ESG side, to actually ensure that you can tell those feel-good stories, that you can prove your positive societal impact or positive environmental impact, that you can show these high-level summaries, right? Not everyone wants to read your sustainability report, for example. Now, ESG versus sustainability. So ESG is a quantifiable assessment of sustainability. As I mentioned, ESG stands for environment and basically denotes the reduction of carbon and other greenhouse emissions, or generally protecting the environment. So it could be multiple things. Social looks into how organizations manage their stakeholder relationships. Then there's obviously, sort of the governance side of things. And the governance side of things really denotes the practice of fairness and transparency in the management, as well as actively disclosing information to relevant stakeholders. So ESG measures these specific criteria within your operations and your business model, and looks at what is the impact and is it sustainable. So ESG and sustainability are really similar because they address environmental and social aspects. However, sustainability may mean different things to different entities. And here are, sort of some of the pillars of sustainability. So there's environmental, this focuses on the planet. Are you energy efficient? what is your climate change strategy? What is your waste reduction strategy, biodiversity, greenhouse emissions, carbon footprint reduction strategy? Then there's social, do you have equal employment opportunities? Do you have a diverse workforce? What are your employee benefits? What are your health and safety, processes and procedures? Community development, responsible supply chain partnership, adhering to labor laws. And you may ask, like, what does this have to do with? I came here for marketing and I came here for brand, but the truth is, it's all connected, and it's all, sort of important, because the brand story and the way that the brand is perceived has to tell a lot of these stories, right? And it has to be, as I said, you need to be honest. So, for example, H&M just got into this really big scandal, which is focused on social, and it's called blue washing, because they basically say that their clothes are made in factories where they've got fair wages, where they don't have child labor, where the employees are paid fairly, where they've got good benefits, and they have proper health and safety processes and procedures and things in place. But the truth is that that's not true. Right, they produce in many factories that have children that have, that work 12-hour shifts or longer. And, when this comes out, consumers go haywire, right? Your ESG ratings go down, sort of people don't trust you, you lose loyalty, you lose trust. And people see that you're saying one thing, but then you're doing another thing, right? And that H&M scandal actually goes sort of far beyond just the blue washing. There's a lot of greenwashing also included, in terms of them saying that they're using recyclable materials, but they're really not, and so on. Then there's economics. So this is, again, corporate governance, your risk management, compliance, ethical business practices, avoiding conflicts of interest, accounting and integrity. So this has a lot to do with how you manage your board, and how that part is managed. The transition to ESG is also something that's sort of really important that we should look at. So where do you sort of start from? And here we're sort of looking at how you go from sustainability into sort of ESG, and making sure that you have ESG metrics that really show the evolution of best practices, and because they're more accurate performance indicators, it really helps. So you've got the business sphere is becoming more sophisticated, and that means that you really need to sort of collect data, create insights, and track metrics that aim at building sort of ESG management. So the organizations then become more sustainable through that, because you're tracking the right type of indicators. And you're looking at your operations and your business, your stakeholder engagement through an ESG lens, rather than sort of the broader cover of sustainability. So what does ESG mean for your brand? And I think this, for me, is really the most important part of all of this, right? The first part was just to set the stage on what exactly is ESG. So ESG is becoming an important metric. I've said that. Businesses and projects have lower risk portfolios, higher gains, and are more resilient to shock, because they've sort of have ESG guidelines and processes in place. So going forward, businesses are going to be expected to have high quality and accurate ESG data, and we're already seeing this. There are ESG ratings for even Nigerian organizations. There are different ESG frameworks by the central bank, by the Nigerian Stock Exchange for publicly listed companies. There's a lot of work going on in this space. But what does that have to do with your brand, and how does that help with this high performance and sustainability, right? So sustainability, like I said, should be part of your brand DNA. And that means that you're sort of looking at that right side of it, right? So how do you make sure that your brand actually reflects what you actually do, especially all the positive things? And for the negative things, how do you make sure that you have commitments towards getting better at all times? And your brand basically is what translates, sort of the efforts that you have into reality and informs your customers. So when you're thinking brand and ESG, there are some things that you should consider. One of them is to basically entrench sustainability into your core values so that, it really translates efficiently across the entire business. You have to work internally as well as externally with other organizations in the ecosystem to sort of address the larger ESG problems. ESG, in the African perspective, a lot of people are like, okay, but, our carbon footprints are not as large. We've made, as a continent, commitments to net zero. We've, sort of looked at how do we, get out of this. So I think it's important to understand that when you're building your ESG strategy and when you're looking at your ESG strategy and your brand strategy, that you don't copy and paste, right? The problems that a lot of Western organizations have are not necessarily the problems that we have. So it means that we can create unique approaches, and we have to make sure that we're also reflecting our current realities. A lot of the time, when you look at ESG strategies of Western brands, you see that the environmental pillar is really, really pushed. I think on the continent, environment may probably take a number 2 seat or even a number 3 seat. You may focus on the social part first, focus on governance, and then focus on environment, simply because those things are more important in terms of solving our social economic development problems that we have. Then you would also sort of look at aligning your strategy with sustainability so that you can start wherever you are and build traction. So you build a strategy and a roadmap for wider stakeholder commitment to sustainability. So sustainability and achieving that doesn't sort of stop with you, right? You have to involve your stakeholders as well. You have to integrate ESG into your brand with people and social at the center of the conversation. Your board has to be engaged, right? So your board needs to have oversight in terms of how you're actually translating ESG into those feel-good stories. How are you showcasing the brand, and how are we building, how are we using what we're doing to build brand equity? So things you should consider when you're thinking ESG and brand, you need to address compliance, understand the regulation in your industry for compliance, communicate this compliance to your stakeholders in a transparent manner. Sometimes you're not there yet, but you're working on it, right? And you need to be honest about it. And I think one brand that does this really well is Patagonia. Obviously, Patagonia is sort of really built on sort of sustainability principles, and sort of that's really what's important to them. But what they've done is, instead of having sort of just an ESG report, they've created a web page where they educate their vendors, they nudge customer behavior by educating their customers, and making sure that the customers understand that the buck doesn't stop with the brand. So if we've produced all the products that we sell in a sustainable manner, we've used recyclable products, we've reduced our carbon footprint, we've reduced usage of water, we've reduced everything, we have fair labor, we've done all of these things, right? We've got good governance, so we're the poster child for ESG. But if the customers then just throw the clothes away, instead of recycling them, or instead of repairing them, or instead of gifting them to someone else, then you still lose, because then your products are still polluting the environment, right? So there's a lot of nudging of the customer that and also the supply chain and vendors that Patagonia does, and they report on this, and they're very honest. They're like, this is where we want to be, but this is where we are today. These are the steps that we're taking and we're tracking, and the entire organization is committed to this, right? So it's important that you, have that level of transparency, and that you also quantify, sort of what you're doing in terms of having business cases, having data that is out there. You have to be proactive and really anticipate what are the areas of improvement, and how do you build them into your strategy before they become a problem. How do you, ensure that you're not sugarcoating the reality or portraying your brand as something that you're not? And this is where information flow is also very important. Sometimes, we think, oh, we're doing everything by the book, but then, we're really not. So making sure that all departments really have access to information before it goes out is important. be clear on the risks, right? So be clear, look at risks at board level in terms of greenwashing, blue washing, the reputational risk, customer loyalty, and things like that. Integrate ESG into your products, customer experience, and marketing and communication. So instead of just saying, okay, we're going to plant 500 trees this year, why are you planting the trees and how can you involve the customers, right? Can, for example, a purchase lead to a point and that point goes towards a tree, and people can actually track this, and people then have trees in their names, for example, right? The more they actually buy from you or use your services, the more trees are planted. That way you're directly linking focus on your sales to, sort of focus on your ESG goals and the, sort of things that you are doing for the environment. So your ESG efforts cannot just be a social media post once a week that says, oh, today is sustainable Sunday, and we're, going to post what we're doing. We painted a school somewhere, or, our employees had a health walk or something like that. Those things are not enough, right? Because that's sort of just using ESG as a checkbox. You've not integrated it into the fabric of your brand. We need to eat, breathe, and sleep, customer experience. ESG has to be integrated. Sustainability needs to be a big part of that. So ESG and content marketing is another, really important thing that you should be thinking about. So brands can actually use the content marketing to drive awareness across stakeholder groups, to educate vendors and the consumers, and position as thought leaders within their industries and become known for being a brand with heart. And I think this is really important, right? Because beyond doing the right thing, it's also nudging behavior of the society. And especially if you're a really big corporate, you've got a lot of power to actually do so and to do that in an effective manner. So we'll go over to inclusive marketing and communications. And this is basically focused on how do we make DEI a part of our brand, right? So we're going to talk about, first of all, what is DEI? So DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and is a term that is used to describe policies and programs that promote the representation and participation of different groups of individuals, including people of different ages, races, and ethnicity, abilities and disabilities, genders, religions, cultures, and sexual orientations. This can also cover people that have diverse background, diverse experiences, skills, and expertise, right? And I think we don't really need to explain why diversity is important and what diversity can do. I think everybody is clear on the fact that the more diverse a group of people is, the more value you find in that group. Inclusive marketing now is basically marketing with the goal of speaking to a diverse audience, bearing in mind the difference in age, ethnicity, gender, identity, socioeconomic status, religion, orientation, and physical and mental ability. So let's just take age, for example, right? So if you're a brand, this is sort of the first time where you've got a multi-generational audience, right? So you're talking to Gen X, you're talking to millennials, you're talking to baby boomers, you're talking to Gen Z. All of these people are very, very different. They use different channels. They do use different customer touch points. They want different types of communication. They are at different stages of their life. So they have different problems, different challenges that you need to solve for them. So you cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to marketing to them. So you have to actually use inclusive marketing to speak to each and every one of them. So why should Nigerian and Pan-African brands and African organizations actually care? First of all, I think on the continent, we've got high levels of diversity in the individual countries, but also across the continent as a whole. Inclusive marketing makes sure that your brand actually connects with the largest possible audience, right? So it helps you expand your customer reach, but it also makes sure that your existing customers create a much stronger bond with your brand, and it increases customer purchasing intent, reputation, and brand loyalty. Inclusive marketing also improves your talent that you can attract across all the levels of the organization, and in turn improves the overall performance of your brand, right? The better your people, the better your organizational performance. Also, with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in place, I think we're going to see a lot of more Pan-African brands that spring up. And that will need to really adopt their marketing to the new Pan-African context. And this basically means that they can't assume or copy and paste their brand marketing strategies and tactics from one country to another on the continent, right? And obviously, if you're building a global brand with a global footprint, then you have to think about many, many things in terms of what consumers want, what is important to the consumers in each of the different markets, what kind of visual ads or communication content actually speak to them, what do they really care about? And that's again where the stakeholder mapping comes in, and it's really, really important. Now, DEI in the Pan-African context. So if you have the right expertise, the right financial capital and cultural willpower, you can really create a more diverse industry and organization that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So to achieve this, African organizations have to really prioritize their DEI from the inside out. So what does that mean? It means that you have to create DEI guidelines within the organization that influence accessibility criteria within your buildings, within your plants, your branches, hiring decisions. So when we look at banks, for example, there are many banks that don't have wheelchair access, right? How do people with a wheelchair or with any other, physical disability actually get into the bank branch? There are very few buildings, even in Lagos, for example, that have accessibility. So, do you have a ramp? Do you have a lift? How are people going to access? How far is your car park? Sometimes your car park is like miles away and you expect people to either have a driver or walk, but that doesn't work if you haven't really thought about accessibility, right? It also focuses on hiring decisions, right? So how do you make sure that you're promoting the right type of talent from disadvantaged groups into leadership positions so that they get more visibility? How do you create mentoring opportunities? Do you have DEI training courses, especially for your leadership and for your management team, so that they understand the importance of diversity and inclusion? How do you create safe spaces for DEI at work through employee resource groups, for example? Brands that have made DEI an integral part of their brand also have to really look at how do you initiate conversations on DEI and find ways to DEI metrics, right? So when it comes to women on boards, for example, there's a company that actually tracks that. And this company ensures that this is public information. So if you're not on that index or very low on that index, then you've got work to do and you know what to do. So it's important that this information is public so that we can hold each other accountable and we can ensure that we're working towards actually creating a more diverse, equitable and inclusive work environment across the continent. So how do you make your brand marketing inclusive? So regardless of the size of your business or industry that you're in, you can, sort of implement some of these inclusive marketing strategies. First of all, review your current brand strategy and brand assets to make sure that they are DEI compliant. Understand your audience, stakeholders, and what matters to them, as well as how they perceive your brand. Making inclusive marketing an everlasting part of your brand. And this you can do through your messaging, through your brand visuals, the language that you use, the sound that you use, multimedia content, your communications channels. By avoiding stereotyping, you can also make sure that you're constantly testing your DEI brand marketing campaigns on focus groups that actually present your actual audience and stakeholders, right? So this way you make sure that you're not stereotyping, you make sure that the messaging is received as intended. You're making sure that the brand visuals don't look like stock photos. You're making sure that the language you're using resonates with people, that the things that you're saying resonate with people, right? And I think that we've seen a lot of, Nigerian brands that have, really great adverts in multiple Nigerian languages, for example, right? And that speak to specific audiences. And, I think that that's really where it comes, where you can recognize yourself in the communication from a brand. Also testing, ensuring that all your digital assets, ads, and products are digitally accessible and compliant, right? So what does that mean? It means that they are accessible to people who have either visual disabilities or hearing disabilities, so that they can actually still access your content that is online. Ensuring that you have sufficient diversity on your team. In order to ensure that you don't build bias into your products and your brand and your communication, you have to have a diverse team that represents all the different facets of diversity in order for you to really be compliant and to really make this part of your DNA. You also have to be really, really intentional, and you have to have a DEI baseline, right? So where are we starting and where do we want to go? How do we want to be perceived? What kind of talent do we want to attract, right? So a lot of brands say, oh, I want to attract Gen Z talent, but really and truly, you look like this old-fashioned brand that no one wants, stuffy, everyone is wearing a tie. We don't want to be part of it. I mean, I'm not Gen Z, but I'm just saying, they don't want to be part of it, because you've made your image and you've made your brand look really traditional, really old. You cannot attract that type of talent. So you have to make changes. You have to have, sort of like your Gen Z poster child that's going to go around and tell people that, oh, actually, they're not like that anymore. They've changed. And I work there and this is what's happening there. And, you need to have support groups. You need to have employees that are, tooting your horn. You have to really understand where are we coming from, and understand, like, how are we tracking this in terms of, sort of the DEI indicators? Is this being reported at board level? What role does branding play? Who is reporting this, right? Is this a people on culture report, or is this a brand report? So it's really, really there. The lines are very, very blurred. So it's really important that, again, you have that collaboration, right? You need to look at how do you identify, eliminate bias in your ads, your products, and and everything else, and how do you diversify your social proof, right? How do you make sure that people who are talking about your brand are from these different diverse backgrounds? And then we'll go over into optimizing the customer experience, product, and design. And just to say, we're going to take questions at the end, so you can drop your questions in the chat. Now, customer experience. Let's start with, what exactly is it? Why is it important? And how do you create it, right? So customer experience is the impression of your customers have of your brand across all the aspects of your customer journey. Customer expectations are higher than ever before, and that means that you've got more competition, they've got more choice, so you have to do well. And when you just look at, sort of maybe the fintech industry or the financial service industry, so let's say banking and fintech together, right? What my banking app can do, a million fintech apps can do. Which one do I choose and why, right? And it boils down to the customer experience. How easily can I get onboarded? How is their communication? How is the customer support? How easy is it to, sort of maybe do different transactions on there? And today what we're seeing is that one negative customer experience can lose you a customer for life, and potentially many more, because if I've got a bad experience, chances are I'm going to go to Twitter, I'm going to go on my Instagram, and I'm going to post how bad your brand is, right? Especially if you've not been responsive. I'm going to post the experience that I've had. I'm going to share that with many people, and I'm going to talk about it. And this may influence people to also not use your brand anymore. And then you also have to sort of think about the cost of retaining a customer versus acquiring a customer. So it costs 7 times more to acquire a new customer than it does to nurture a positive existing customer relationship. Satisfied customers generate up to 2.6 times more revenue for a business than somewhat satisfied customers, and 14% more revenue than somewhat dissatisfied customers, right? So this is huge. So you need to make sure that your customers are having a good experience in order for them to be satisfied. And I think it's really important that we make the distinction between customer experience and customer satisfaction, right? Customer experience produces customer satisfaction if done right, but they're not the same thing. So sometimes you have brands that, talk about, oh, we've got really great customers. Our customers are so happy. We have a lot of, great awards for customer satisfaction, but it doesn't mean that your customer experience is great, right? it means that you're doing something right, but it doesn't mean that you don't have friction. It doesn't mean that there are no buying objections. It doesn't mean that there are no drop-off points within your customer experience. 68% of marketing leaders say that they are increasingly competing on the basis of customer experience, right? So this means that customer experience is becoming a metric that marketing leaders are actually measuring, which is why we're talking about it here. And one of the things is really building interconnected experiences. So whether you're online or offline, the consumer is expecting a frictionless customer experience that really fits into their day-to-day and lifestyle. And I'll give an example. There's a brand on Instagram that sells really great jollof rice, and I tried to order from them on Instagram, and they said, no, you need to go on the website. I went on the website and the rice is always sold out. So I went back to their DM and I went on their WhatsApp and I'm like, hey, your rice is always sold out. What do I do? And they were like, oh, well, you have to go really early in the morning and then it won't be sold out. So I'm like, okay. I wake up at 6 and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm here now, still sold out. They're like, oh, yes, we haven't posted it yet. You need to come back by 8. I'm like, okay, come back by 8, still sold out. They're like, oh, yeah, sorry, today we're not actually going to have any. I'm like, guys, how is it this hard for me to order rice? I'm like, okay, because I'm already chatting with you, right? So why can't you take my order? I don't need this rice today. You can deliver in 3 days if that's when the rice is ready. Anytime you have the rice, I want to eat it, right? I'm happy to send you the money ahead because I know that this rice is good. So please, tell me how to pay. No, ma, you have to order on the website. Guess who didn't get rice? Me. Guess who didn't get money? Them. Now, this means that they had a lot of friction in their customer experience, right? But if that process was frictionless, I would probably talk about it. I would give them good reviews. I would talk about all the qualities that they have across, sort of how quickly I can make a transaction and buy my rice. I would have talked about, sort of how easy it is to do everything. But unfortunately, that was not the case, right? They had multiple channels that all didn't work and that where I could not place an order or make a payment. And sometimes you haven't really thought through your actual customer experience and how the customer feels about, sort of this experience. So it's important that you really think about your interconnected experiences. So interconnected means that we must analyze how people go about buying things in this digitally integrated world and tailor this to our customer journey, right? So sometimes we're like, yes, this is how we want the customer to go. But the customer is like, no, this makes no sense. I don't want to go like this. I want to send you a WhatsApp. I want to send you a DM because I don't have time to go through your cumbersome website, or your website is not even updated or working, right? So you have to really look at the whole ecosystem surrounding purchase, sign up, and download decisions. And then basically take into consideration when you're creating these experiences, how that sort of works and how you go from online to offline and how you make sure that everything is done seamlessly. So you have to ask yourself, what's our customer experience strategy and who owns it? A lot of the time, there's no one that really owns it, no one that's testing for friction, no one that's reviewing it consistently. Does the customer experience serve our customers or does it serve us? It should serve your customer, but a lot of the time, you've built processes that are easy for you, not easy for the customer. How does data and insights support our customer experience? Now, some of the fundamentals of optimizing your customer experience are to sort of update and optimize the buyer personas that you have, the customer profiles, have cross-generational personas and profiles so that you can really sort of speak to all of the different people within your target demographic, invest in a customer experience strategy, and make sure that you have journeys for interconnected, customer journeys. So think omni-channel, make sure you have online, offline, and all of that included. Invest in reliable data that can give you consumer insights. And then you can do brand sprints, right? Using design thinking. So I'd mentioned that earlier, when I talked about the, sort of brand challenges and how you can work on brand challenges using design thinking and using design sprints. So here you really want to sort of develop low fidelity prototypes that can be tested on real customers, employees, vendors, stakeholders, and that can be developed into MVPs. or full-fledged products campaigns using insights gained from the prototype testing. So what does that mean? It means that you create, part of your customer, or reimagine part of your customer experience, show it to actual customers and say, what do you think about this? Do you like this? Does this create value for you? Have quite specific questions that you're looking to address, right? Also, optimize your funnel, right? So align your lead generation, customer acquisition, and retention goals with the different stages of your funnel while you're addressing buying objections and creating content. Have the right type of calls to actions, have touch points and experiences that support each stage, right? Your customer is not always the same person. And what does that mean? So if I'm discovering this jollof rice for the first time, I'm probably like, oh, okay, is this rice good? Will they deliver on time? How do I order it? I don't really know enough about the brand to make a decision. So I'm like, oh yeah, maybe not. Now I then speak to someone and the person's like, oh my God, this rice is so amazing. You have to order it. Or I go somewhere and I taste this rice and I'm like, wow, I need to order this rice. When I come back, I'm not the same person anymore, because now you need to speak to me in a different manner. Now price is important to me. Now delivery time is important to me. Now ease of ordering is important to me, right? And then once you've converted me into a customer, you have to speak to me in a different manner as well, because now I've bought from you. You want me to buy again. You want to tell me, Nkem, there's a special going on. And Nkem, you haven't ordered lunch in a while. What's going on? Are you on a diet? What's happening? You want to make sure that the touch points and experiences really support the different stages of your funnel. You also have to constantly test your customer experience, your products, and your funnel to make sure that you're identifying and eliminating friction, right? You have to look at what is the feedback that you're getting from your customers, right? So if you're big organizations, make sure that you're reviewing customer support queries and mapping them to specific products, right? You're looking at online feedback and feedback from direct engagements with customers, right? You're looking at how do you humanize your brand? How do you humanize and personalize the customer experience as much as possible? You have to also constantly innovate around your customer experience. And it might just be the right time to actually hire a chief customer experience officer who has full ownership of the entire customer experience. Customer support is also very important. How do you weave in customer self-service solutions like chatbots, FAQs, where the customer can get quick support? However, be very careful. You have big organizations like Amazon that don't even have phone numbers on their website anymore. And you have to speak to a bot, and the bot doesn't know what you want, and the bot can't answer your questions, and you get a ticket that doesn't work. And, then, at some point you give up, and then you don't buy, or you can't return, or whatever it is that you wanted, simply because they've not actually made the experience easy and known when to hand over to a human. So you have to have proactive customer support. It's really, really important. So the key takeaways are that a remarkable customer experience is critical to the sustained growth of any business. You have to have a positive customer experience that promotes loyalty, helps you retain customers, and encourages brand advocacy. You have to reduce friction and address buying objection, impacts conversion and turns, and actually, sort of like once you address the friction and the buying objection, it can then impact the actual conversion that you do and also impact your bottom line. Focus on optimizing your existing customer experience. Don't build new products on an already wobbly foundation. So what we're seeing is a lot of brands are just like, oh, hey, I want to launch a new product. That's great, but please don't. Build your foundation and make sure the foundation is strong before you launch a new product. Customer experience and customer satisfaction are not the same thing. I think this is really, really important. Customer experience is more of the technical, actual flow of the experience, and customer satisfaction is the outcome of that. Your products are a big part of the customer experience and require frequent reviews to optimize and improve the experience, right? So test. Make sure you are involving your customers in that as well. And now we'll go to data and personalization and automation and reporting. And the first thing, data is everything, right? People say data is the new oil or the new gold, whatever you want to call it. But marketing data is basically information that is machine readable and benefits the marketing team, right? So it can be collected from public, private sources and helps identifying ideal customers, crafting compelling content, and building more effective campaigns. And you basically can't do marketing without data. Data helps you better understand your customers and stakeholders. It helps you create more effective products and promotions. So that means that you actually have insights onto who are these customers, who are the stakeholders, what matters to them, how do we interact with them. You can create better products because you have data that actually tells you where do people drop off, where's the friction, what do we need to change, what is sort of maybe the messaging that is wrong here, and things like that. Data is also important when it comes to designing an optimized marketing process, right? So you want to be able to sort of automate your marketing process and have a sort of MarTech stack that makes sense. So it's really, really important that you select the right metrics and KPIs across each of the marketing roles and track them, properly, and that you are able to, sort of also do some A/B testing in order to see things properly. Now, expertise in the left brain fields of IT, finance, and data analysis is no longer optional in marketing departments, right? So digital is basically central to your marketing and gathering critical data, and technology is driving the rapid evolution of your strategies for targeting, sort of these different things across the customers. Now, when it comes to the sort of optimization, right, of the customer experience, we had already sort of spoken a little bit to sort of humanizing the brand and personalizing the brand, right, and thinking about what stage of the funnel is your customer at in order to communicate with the person properly. So your customer experience has to focus on service, not sales. It has to orchestrate engagement campaigns, and it has to be human and personalized. So it's really, really important that you really think about your communication and the fact that it's no longer one way. So consumers want to be heard. They want to influence product development. Conversations have to happen with them. Brands have to engage, right? So you can't just say, oh yeah, well, I'm the brand, so I'm going to tell you what you're going to like. No, ask me what I like and I'll tell you, and then you can make a better product for me, and then I'll spend more money with you. Consumers want brands that are human, brands that care, brands that support causes, brands that influence product, sort of development, that celebrate their own. So brands that showcase their employees, brands that show you that it's not just this corporate thing. We are actual people behind this, and people who care, people who have families, people who are just like you and me. Data plays a big role in knowing your customers. So I talked about data and the importance of data and what you can do with your data. So you have to go out with the generic and in with, sort of segmentation. So understand, who is this person? What does this person care about? Does this person have 5 children, 1 child, 10 cars? All of these different data points will actually help you serve this person better. So a lot of people sort of say, oh yeah, well, we need to have the right tools, we need to have the right technology in place. Yeah, that's great. But technology is really secondary. And it's basically sort of what drives your marketing, or sort of the foundation of the marketing, but it is not the actual marketing, right? So you can have the best tools in the world if you don't know how to use them, or if they're just wrong for the purpose and they don't actually fit what you're trying to achieve, then you're not going to get, sort of good output. So you have to use the right type of data to, sort of drive that as well. Now, personalization is more than just, sort of calling me by my name. And I really like, sort of the sound of this, because it really speaks to the fact that just because you say, dear Nkem, doesn't mean that you've personalized for me, right? Because if you have no other information apart from my name, you cannot actually, sort of personalize my experience for me. And a lot of brands still sort of batch and blast, right? So they just send out, bulk emails, and suddenly it's like, why are you sending me an email about, university. My child is 6. He is very far from university. I've got, other things that I'm focusing on that have to do with primary school, not with university. Why are you sending me this? So it's really important that, we really think about how do we get customer information that we can use to build personalization, right? How do we make sure that we understand where they're located, the channel that is even their preference, right? So I don't like phone calls. If you send me an email, you'll have a response much quicker. If you send me a WhatsApp, you'll have a response much quicker than if you call me, right? Simply because I don't like phone calls, and I don't have a lot of time for phone calls because I spend most of my days in meetings. So knowing this about your customer, knowing the preferred channel, knowing when it's their birthday, knowing when it's their child's birthday, knowing sort of like, okay, they've just bought a house or they've just bought a car, that helps you with this sort of personalization. Now, personalization helps you increase your customer feedback, improve your customer experience, increases loyalty, improves lead nurturing, and also raises customer retention. So it's all in the customer journey. I've already sort of talked about, sort of the role of technology. So marketing automation can really help you sort of automate a lot of the processes. Automation is an essential tool for delivering optimized customer experiences, right? The more you can automate, the faster the experience is and the better the experience is, right? It also provides opportunities for cleaner data, right? Because you don't have human error that you're bringing in. But you have to choose the right tools and the right functionalities. Automation can help you understand your customers better. It helps you lead sort of better segmentation that is more optimized for you. It helps you engage with your customers efficiently. It helps you gain qualified leads faster, and it enhances sort of the collaboration within your team, because everybody has access to the same data and reports, and sort of can do things much faster. Now, the last part of this section is focused on reporting. So what do we need to track, right? And marketing can be measured, and especially digital marketing. So it's really important that we actually do so. A lot of the time, you sort of show, oh, yes, we were in this newspaper and we've done this and we've done that, but you're not actually measuring success. And this can be very dangerous, because then you're spending money and you don't know what your ROI actually is. So you have to understand the business drivers, and really understand, what is important to the business, so that the metrics can be aligned to that. So again, the understanding the business goals and then translating those to marketing objectives and making sure that you have metrics that track that is really, really important. And this can be, sort of the customer lifetime value, customer acquisition cost, and ROI, like I mentioned earlier. You have to have a pipeline of growth ideas. So today, there are a lot of roles that are growth hackers, right? What do these people do? They create innovations that actually drive growth. And to make sure that you're keeping your customers, you have to delight them. You have to exceed their expectations. You have to anticipate and discover and fulfill their talent needs. You have to make sure that your board is attuned to the research around, sort of market research tools, that they also really once or twice a year look at the marketing very detailed, looking at how the customer base is segmented, how the size and profitability of each segment is changing, how is the company's products and services really address the needs of each of these segments, right? What are you doing in terms of your marketing, right? Do you have the right skills in your marketing department? Because marketing is evolving. We're moving from Web 2 to Web 3, and marketing is playing a really big role in that move. Do you have someone who can create a metaverse strategy for your organization? If you don't, then you should really be thinking about who is that person going to be? Who is the person who understands, sort of the nuances and changes within marketing? So once a year, you should really be looking at, what are the gaps within the department? Do we need to restructure the department? Does this structure still serve us? Or do we need to restructure how we're thinking about sort of the talent within the organization that is marketing and brand focused? And how do we make sure that they have oversight across board so that now the key takeaways for this section is that communication is no longer one way. Brands have to engage. Technology and marketing automation create a foundation for delivering high performance brands. Data plays a key role in engaging optimally with your customers. You have to track and you have to track the right metrics. Board members and executives need to understand what these metrics actually are. They need to make sure that we, sort of are aligned in terms of the organizational and growth plans. You have to personalize and you have to make sure that that's integrated with sort of the relevant customer touch points. You can't ask me for my data over and over again just because I want to use a new service from your organization. You have to make sure that you have a deep understanding of the customer journey, that you reduce friction, and you have to make sure that your marketing gets good visibility at the board level for effective oversight, right? So a lot of the time you see that marketing doesn't have a slot at board, but this needs to change, because if it doesn't, then you have got a lot of problems and a lot of risks that you don't actually know how you're addressing effectively. You have to innovate for growth to gain and sustain brand equity, and you have to audit your branding and marketing teams to align skills, capabilities, and organizational goals, as well as the new trends within marketing, and balance in-house and outsourced skills that you may require at every time. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about brand challenges, and this is the last section, and then we'll open it up to questions. So, common brand challenges. So we've already talked about some at the beginning, but now we've sort of segmented them into different categories. So there's strategy, lack of a defined brand strategy. Your brand strategy doesn't align with your organizational goals. You don't have enough collaboration, so that makes your execution fall apart, and your brand strategy, sort of isn't cohesive. There's a very poor experience across all of the different stakeholders. You lack structure, commitment, and collaboration, right? So there's no collaboration and teamwork within the various teams. There's no board oversight. There's lack of ownership and reporting structures. Or you have a brand challenge. You have a weak brand, you have no brand, you have a visually only brand, you have an incomplete brand, you have an inconsistent brand. Maybe you have ESG and DEI, and you're just looking at them as checkboxes that exist outside of your brand. You're not integrating them into the customer experience, integrating them into the fabric of the organization. You lack understanding in how to seamlessly do that. This lack of governance structure. So you're losing hold of your brand identity, and your brand identity is all over the place because employee Y decides to use pink and the other one decides to use purple because that's how they see your brand color. And you have no control. The brand seems outdated and lackluster due to sort of the current focus not being represented in the current branding. So sometimes we outgrow our brands and we've evolved a little bit. And that means that we need to really rethink our brand and refresh our brand and make sure that we're, sort of doing that periodically. We can have customer experience challenges as well. Poor customer experience, lack of data and insights, lack of, sort of focus groups, lack of customer engagement. So you're not creating with the customer, you're creating for the customer. You're not reducing friction, you're not reviewing your customer experience, you're not creating products without, having the proper foundation in place. You're just, sort of just winging it. You're like, yes, we need more products. That's why we're not making sales. The truth is you're not making sales because your customer experience is extremely poor. Now, some of the other challenges are around data and reporting. So you're focusing on the wrong metrics or business drivers. You're not tracking success of campaigns and products. You're not tracking, sort of anything that's important. You're just tracking things that make you look good. This is very problematic, and you really need to make sure that you're tracking the right things. Reputation can also be a really big brand challenge in terms of you've encountered reputational damage because you've done something that has angered your customers, angered your shareholders, angered your vendors, angered the community that you operate in. You've been accused of greenwashing or blue washing. You've sort of have really high attrition rates because you've got a toxic brand. People are talking about your brand. You don't have proper brand equity to actually attract and retain talent. You've got a technology problem. You've got friction within your marketing stack. There's no interoperability. The data doesn't, sort of go from dependencies marketing technology stack that don't allow you to easily migrate from your systems or your data. All of these things are, sort of really big challenges. Budget is another challenge where you either have no budget, right? Because you sort of don't really prioritize marketing, and it's like, okay, we want to do an event. Yeah, sure, we'll assign a little bit, but in your overall budget, there's no real sort of annual budget that is based on specific strategy and specific activities. You've got an inadequate budget that is allocated to brand strategy and implementation. So you basically have a budget, but it's not enough, and it won't give you results because you're looking at it as a cost center as opposed to an investment. Or you've got a decent budget, but you're allocating it to the wrong things and you have a poor return on investment simply because you're not tracking. So those are the different brand challenges. So I think if you see yourself in some of those, then you're already on the right track. And if you don't, then here is how you can identify some of these brand challenges. So you can do periodic and strategic reviews on brand audits. You can ensure that you have, sort of the right baseline. You can do scenario planning and risk analysis. You can analyze the volume and type of customer support and complaints. You can look at what is the public brand sentiment. You can achieve this through social listening. You can do analytics across all customer touch points and really look at how are we performing across these different touch points? What is working? What is not working? You can look at consumer behavior and sort of look at cross-generational patterns. You can look at your competitors and do a market analysis and really look at what are the trends within the market? How do we fit in? How well are we actually performing? What is the brand perception of our customers, when they see us versus our competitor? Also, as a board, you should ask the right questions and ensure that you have access to the right information. A lot of the time, board reports are more skewed towards what's working well and what makes us look good as an organization or as a unit or a team, rather than, sort of really showing the things that are critical and where we still have a lot of work to do and where the board can actually create a lot of insight and give advice and steer us in the right direction. So important for boards to understand, brand marketing and brand strategy in depth so that they can ask the right questions and they can ask for the right things to be shown in the reports. Review the metrics you're currently tracking and ask yourself if they're the right ones. I think this is really, really important. Ask your stakeholders and listen to them, right? Not just ask them, what do you think about us? What do you think about our products? But listen. And when it's not positive, take it on, right? And make a change. Be clear about your purpose, your mission, your vision, your values, and let them guide your brand. Have a brand strategy in place and continuously evolve the brand strategy. Have a proper governance framework in place as well. This is so important because everything can fall apart if you don't have that in place. Carry all your internal stakeholders along to ensure everyone is on the same page. Build a solid foundation before you grow and scale. Be open to rapid prototyping and brand sprints to test concepts. Co-create with your stakeholders, customers, partners, and employees and competitors. Upskill your team, board, and management, right? So these are all ways that you can actually mitigate or solve your biggest brand challenges. Use your data, the insights that you can derive from it, understand success metrics, track them in real time with board oversight. Reputation tracking is important, social listening is important, and doing that consistently. Listen to your customers, build for your customers, not, or pretty much build for and with your customer, right? So don't just build for them, but build for and with them so that they are involved and you can, the blind spots you have, everybody has blind spots. No matter how good you are, you will have a blind spot of something that you haven't thought about, something that you haven't seen because you're simply not the customer. So listen to your customers, make sure that you're co-creating with them. Do what you say and stand for it. Don't sugarcoat things. Don't create the wrong impression. Focus on an inclusive and diverse workplace that really fosters equity and positive culture. So I'm sure a lot of people are asking yourself, okay, so what next? So 2023 is here. How is your brand going to evolve? And I think really as board members and executives, what you should be asking yourself is, have we audited our brand? Do we have a brand strategy in place? Is our brand strategy part of our organizational fabric or DNA? Do we know what our brand's biggest challenges are and how do we solve for them? Do we have clarity on our stakeholders integrating ESG or DEI into our brand strategy and optimizing our overall customer experience, right? Do we know how to do that? Are we doing that already? How are we using our data? What can we automate and how do we humanize our brand and our communications? Does our branding team and marketing team, our board, our management have the right skills and knowledge? And if not, how do we upskill them? And with that, we have made it to the end of this masterclass. So I'm happy to take some questions. I've seen some questions in the chat. Will the recording be shared at the end of this masterclass? Yes, it will. Okay, what is the difference between a brand refresh and rebranding? It's one of the questions. So a brand refresh is basically sort of looking at the existing brand collateral and then making sure that you that everything is aligned, right? So sometimes we've got, sort of banners that were created 5 years ago, and then we've got things that were created today. And then we have things that, I don't know, some different graphic designer created. And with that, we then create inconsistency, right? Sometimes our brand has also evolved. Sometimes there are pictures that are outdated. Sometimes it's, sort of maybe we've changed our font. Sometimes we're updating or refreshing the logo colors. Now, a rebrand means that you're changing your visual brand identity fully, right? So you're doing a new logo, you're changing all your brand collateral, you're redesigning everything from scratch, right? This is necessary when you've maybe been in business for a really long time. Let's say you're 25 years old, you still have the logo that, you did in, I don't know, Word or Paint or CorelDRAW 25 years ago. It doesn't look good. People are saying, is this a real brand? But you're already really big. And we see this with even listed companies where they've really outgrown their, sort of their branding, and they really should be looking at how do we rebrand for the new generation, right? How do we make sure that our branding resonates with our current customer base? How do we make sure that our branding resonates with the younger generation that we're trying to speak to? Now, the other question that we have here is the difference between customer experience and customer service. Oh, that's a good question. So customer service is basically, me being, let's say, let's use the Jollof rice example, right? So customer service is what I got from the person I was chatting with. The person was telling me what I should do, right? It was giving me advice in terms of how I can get their product. They were very polite, they were very friendly, but they couldn't help me. That's customer service. The customer experience is the entire journey. Me going to see them on Instagram, clicking on the DM, sending them a message, them saying, no, not here, me going to the website not working, right? Now, a seamless customer experience could have been me going to the DM, them having an automated message in the DM to say, hi, if you want to make an order, click here. Then I click, and then it takes me to the website actually working, me being able to place my order, pay for my order, get my order in my house, and then them sending me a message to say, we hope you enjoyed your rice. Do you want to leave us a review? That's customer experience, right? That's not customer service. So I hope that sort of clarifies. If you have a follow-on question on that, please do share that as well. What is brand positioning and how can you put your brand name in the minds of people? So brand positioning is basically all of the different things that are done through brand strategy. So if you've been here from the beginning, we talked about the different elements of brand strategy. We talked about the visual part. We talked about the voice. We talked about purpose, mission, vision, values. We talked about, the messaging. We talked about the role of marketing within brand. I think that when we then talk about brand positioning, it is, what do you want to be known for? What do you stand for? Who are you? What is your purpose? And how do you, sort of get that, sort of sorted out, right? So that is what the difference is, right? So I'm going to stop sharing my, fantastic. All right, I think Bella wants to add something. Bella, welcome.
I've been here. I was actually logged in on 2 devices just to be sure that I didn't get thrown out again. So I wanted to speak to the question about brand positioning. So brand positioning, you have to decide which of the components you want to kind of like do battle in, quote and unquote. So first of all, there's a frame of reference. What category do you want to compete in? There's no point wanting to compete maybe for the best customer experience, but for some reason, the way you're being perceived by the customer is for, I don't know, being vocal. That way you're positioned for the wrong thing, even though you're really focused on another thing. So aside the frame of reference is also defining the target market. Who is this brand being created for? So for instance, like Nkemdilim had mentioned in one of the sections, we have multi-generations being used by a particular brand, but brands within their organizational goals and activities know who exactly is the money maker, who they must never, ever, ever, what's the word I'm looking for? Who they must always focus on and never alienate in any way, shape, or form. So your brand positioning must reflect that particular group of your target segment, must see themselves and appreciate your brand in that manner. And then what are the key benefits? Ikeme has talked about that you must absolutely deliver on based on the aforementioned of the category of reference as well as the target market. And then lastly, what are the proof points that your brand has to make? So these are the things you need to look at with regards to brand positioning. And I've taken time to list these components because sometimes we see this all the time. Brands tend to focus on just one. They focus on the target segment and then they go all off on a tangent. And the very reason for which they've been created, their purpose, is somehow lost in between, all the noise that they're making just because they feel they should appeal to a certain target segment. So I trust that answers the question.
Yes, so we have another question here that says, what do you advise as the best approach to build brand strategy if this is your primary role within the organization? Where and how do you begin? So I'll take a stab at this and then Bella can jump in as well. So I think you need to start with a brand audit, right? And then really figure out, where are you? Look at the organizational goals. Is your marketing strategy or brand strategy supporting this? Have you integrated all the different parts into the brand strategy, right? Do you even have a written down brand strategy? If you don't have that, then that's where you really need to start. You need to do your stakeholder mapping. You need to look at the customer experience. You need to look at what kind of marketing stack do you have? What technology are you using? Do you have data? Are you collecting the right data? And really sort of look at, do we have a foundation? If yes, then you sort of build a brand strategy that builds on top of that foundation. If you don't have the foundation, then you need to build the foundation first, and your brand strategy should focus on building that foundation. So if you're internal, the first thing is to really just do a very deep dive audit into, sort of where are we, what are we doing? And also sometimes the best way of actually doing a brand strategy is to bring in a third-party consultant like Futuresoft that can help you build that brand strategy, right? That has experience with building these type of strategies for brands, that can look at the right things, that can ask the right questions, right? And sometimes an external voice also helps with elevating the conversation to make sure that the right type of stakeholders, the right type of leadership is involved in that conversation, right? Sometimes, you know, because leadership hasn't really understood the importance of brand strategy, they are like, I don't have time for this meeting, I'm not going to come. And then you can't actually develop a proper brand strategy because you need their input. However, a lot of the time when you bring a consultant in, and the consultant requests for, you know, an interview, an audience, a meeting, or for them to join a session or be part of a workshop, then the conversation really changes. And that's where you then see a lot more leadership buy-in, which is really important. So Bella, I'll let you add to that.
Yeah, so I was going to say two things. So number one, be prepared to be an evangelist if you work within an organization where they're a bit slow to pick up on why it's important. And as an evangelist, something else you should do, and this is you being strategic since it's your primary role, is to quickly identify, and this is based on understanding your foundation, is to quickly identify what are the short-term wins that when you present to the board or to C-level, you did really specify if you're C-level, so that short wins that when you show it to them, they easily lean and like, oh, okay, if we did this and we got this, then okay, definitely you have my ears and you have my support now. So I would say those are two things you should absolutely do.
Okay, great. There's another question that says, what tools do you advise for tracking and measuring your progress across various metrics? Should this be outsourced? So it depends on how you're set up. I think that if you've got a data enterprise office, then the data enterprise office should be in charge of actually doing the measuring and metrics. And it also helps to have a data analyst on your marketing team that actually understands how to turn data into insights, and that can, you know, sort of help you create those reports. Now, in terms of the type of tools, the tools really differ across the different touch points, across the different, you know, things that you're using. A lot of the marketing technology tools already have inbuilt analytics, and then there are, you know, sort of platforms like Databox where you can pull it all together and you can build dashboards that are really cohesive and sort of pull in all the analytics from across the different platforms that you're using. Now, if you've got a data scientist in there, that person will be able to help you do all of those things, right? So you may not need to outsource it. However, if you know, sort of don't have any of that within the organization, then you may want to outsource the sort of creation of the reporting and dashboards, but then sort of manage the actual, you know, sort of day-to-day yourself, right? Because once you've got the templates and once everything is set up, then it's much easier to actually pull in all the right data. Well, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that.
No, pretty much covered.
Okay. Then there is a question about, you mentioned developing a metaverse strategy for your brand. How do we develop that? I think it's the same way that you would develop any other strategy for any other channel, right? It's really to look at what can your brand do within the metaverse? How do you engage in the metaverse? And I'll give an example, right? So there is a restaurant in New York. It's called the Fly Fish Club. It's founded by Gary Vee. And he basically launched the membership of his this restaurant as an NFT. So you had to buy the NFT, and they were selling for about $4,500 at the time. Now, he made $20 million in 20 minutes through this strategy, right? And what happened is that a lot of people bought the membership on the primary market, sold it on the secondary market to people who actually wanted to be members, right? And today, if you want to go to that restaurant, you have to be a member. You have to have your NFT on your phone. You have to be able to show your NFT in order to get access, right? So that is basically building loyalty, building membership within the metaverse. So that's very, very basic. It has nothing to do with VR goggles. It has nothing to do with, sort of, mixed reality or anything like that. is simply an NFT being used to drive loyalty, being used to drive status, being used to drive membership. So that could be, something that you look at as a brand. So I think it's really to sort of, first of all, understand the different facets of the metaverse and how your brand can leverage that from a marketing perspective. And also whether your customers or particular segments of your customers are already within the metaverse and already actively using the metaverse. And if they are, how they're using that, right? And whether this will help you also unlock a new type of audience that you're maybe trying to tap into. So I think in terms of developing it, it's first understanding it and then sort of creating the strategies that are in line with your business goals. Bella, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to going back to something we had mentioned earlier, just in case this person that asked wasn't there at that point, is understanding your business drivers. So there's no point rushing into it if it doesn't tie in with your goals and it's not going to move the needle. So sometimes with advancements in technology, we find that some people just hop on the bandwagon because it's cool. And then they make such a big mess of it that it takes away from the brand equity they had already built from the other things, the other services, products, and what they do. And then also, how does this tie into your growth plan? So even if it's not a current driver, and you don't see it as a current driver, but if you are constantly innovating and trying to unlock new opportunities and new segments, then you should absolutely look into it and, like Nkem said, understand it first, see how it works for you. But I'll just add one more thing, but watch your back. If your competition is already dabbling in there, then you need to make it a focus if it isn't one currently.
Yeah, we have one more question. If data shows that the core demographic your strategy is targeting is not using your product, what do you do? Do you want to take a stab at that?
Yes. So if that happens, or if that is happening, it might be a messaging thing. How are you presenting your brand? So it's something that has to do with a lot of auditing. You might have to do like surveys, in-person direct interviews to understand why, and then if any focus group was done at some point during development, you might want to go back to it and be sure that you touched on everything that was mentioned or brought up. And also I would say, as in, look at it, first of all, the messaging and the presentation. Why is the audience, the target demographic, not engaging with it? And then if you've done any surveys or research in the past, you might want to go back to it. If you haven't done any at all, this might be a good time to invest in surveys and other kinds of research. So I don't know, I hope that.
Yeah, I think that answers the question. Okay, someone is asking whether they get the presentation material. So we will have the replay available, but the presentation will not be available. For obvious reasons. Okay. Okay, then there's another question. Thank you for the presentation. Would you be willing to do a customized masterclass for the Marcoms people in the organization if invited? Yes, sure, we can do that. I'm going to send you my email address so that you can reach out to me directly, and then we can discuss the details of that. So, any other questions?
I don't see any.
Okay, I think that's it question-wise. So you will receive an email with the replay once we've uploaded it. Okay, other people also want our contact. I will put our email addresses in the main chat so that everybody can see that.
Presentation slides again.
Presentation slides will unfortunately not come to you. They're proprietary material of our organization, and that's why we can't actually distribute them to people within the class. But you'll have access to the replay, so you can rewatch everything and sort of maybe refresh your notes and whatever you need from it. If you have sort of more specific questions, you can reach out to us. If you are looking to do a brand audit as you enter 2023, please do reach out. If you are looking to have a sort of refresh of your brand strategy or build a new brand strategy, we're here for you. So email us. Those are our email addresses that I've put in the main chat. And if there are no further questions, I think we can close this masterclass. And I would just like to say thank you for everyone who stayed through. I know we've sort of gone over time quite a bit, but I think the fact that people stayed through throughout the entire masterclass really helped us sort of deliver more value, and also shows that there is a lot of interest in this area. Okay, someone wants to know what it would cost to do a brand audit. I would say please email us, because it really depends on the size of your organization. It depends on, sort of how mature your organization already is, whether you have an existing brand strategy in place, whether you have a marketing stack in place, how many products you have, if you're a brand with multiple subsidiaries, and things like that, whether you are in, sort of a local brand, a Pan-African brand, a global brand, that all of that sort of goes into, sort of determining, first of all, the time that it will take to do the audit, as well as the cost. So if you send us an email, then we can get further details and send you costing.
That's okay then.
Awesome. All right. So with that, I think we can wrap up. So thank you very much from me. And
thank you all so much. We look forward to working with you to get your brand on track.
All right. Bye-bye.